You wish we a merry... No, reject.
I just want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from the Tin Dog Podcast.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
This episode was recorded a number of weeks ago, as all of our episodes are, and we forgot at the time that it was going to be going out just before Christmas. So you've just heard Michael's Tin Dog Podcast Christmas greeting, and I will very quickly add a very happy Christmas to all of you before we dive into the episode. Enjoy, and we'll see you in the new year.
Hello and welcome to another in a long line, hopefully, of the UFOcast. I'm Michael.
And I'm Luke.
This time, we're talking about episode 6, Conflict.
Ooh!
I know, conflict is a source of drama.
Yes, and Conflict, the title that zooms out of the screen when it comes up at the beginning of the episode.
It certainly does. It's just coming at you like it's nobody's business.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that the only example of moving titles that come at you?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Well, it's the only one so far.
It's the only one so far, yes. So we will have to watch out as to whether other titles do interesting things in future episodes. Off the top, I couldn't tell you. I believe it's possible that there is stuff, but we'll find out as we go.
Right. Because it's become, it's not exactly a tradition because we're only a few episodes in, but let's start with the synopsis and then we can take it apart from there. So, again, this is from the Box Tree book. Ed Straker is convinced that space debris, discarded rocket boosters and other junk, is both a danger and a cover for alien activity. Dun dun dun. It doesn't say that here. But even after the deaths of 2 shadow spacemen, he is unable to convince General Henderson of the International Astrophysics Commission to resolve the problem. By the time Straker takes Henderson to Shadow HQ to prove his point, it may be too late. They will only be able to clear away the debris if they can survive an attack of the UFO that is homing in right behind it. There you go. That's what it says here. That's not kind of my experience of the episode at all.
Well, you've been trailing this for several weeks as
I know
adventures in. What did you call
normally,
it?
Normally, it's adventures in human resources. That's what a lot of episodes are. But this one's not. This one's adventures in tidying up.
Yeah,
it really is. Now, right? Okay.
Can I take it that you didn't like this episode, then, Michael?
Well, not a huge amount, I must admit. It didn't grab me as such. The problem for me, it's Henderson himself. He just seems angry for no reason. And the worst bit is, for me, I did not realise, because I'm so slow, that Henderson is the bloke from the very first episode in the very beginning, at the start, who almost goes, "Go on, why don't you form Shadow?" He's the bloke trying to be a fixer at the beginning,
yes.
And he's all pro, let's all take on the aliens at the very beginning. And I didn't, because he's obviously dressed differently, and I'm so stupid that if someone's suddenly wearing slightly different costume, I don't recognise them immediately.
Right. Well, and also we were led to believe that only Ed Straker had survived the car crash.
Well, yeah.
So this is the. Obviously, again, it depends on which order you watch the episodes in, but in this order, this is the first episode after that very brief appearance at the beginning that Henderson reappears, and we have no context for what he's been doing for the last decade. We obviously will later discover that he had to spend some time in a wheelchair following the accident, and I don't know. I mean, obviously, you're right. We have no real context for why he's so angry at Straker, why they're at loggerheads. We just kind of plunge straight into it at the beginning of the episode.
So even if you were clever enough to spot that it's apparently the same character, which it might not have been, it might have just been the same actor in 2 roles. I mean, let's face it, we've all experienced that in various programs.
Well, we've got a few of those coming up in the next couple of episodes as we get to explore that. Yeah.
But so you've got General Henderson being very cross about Straker in general, but there's lots of business with walking through corridors and big office blocks and things like that. But apparently we've got some big space commission, and their job is to tidy up. Now, right, okay, there's this old trick with TV that used to happen a lot, right?
Right.
And it's in my notes. It's in pale green, so I'll just try and read it. But the trick is, if you've got a fairly lackluster narrative, and Murder, She Wrote was a very good example of this sort of thing, right? Where what you'd have is, and I keep citing that as an example, and that's not very healthy or clever of me, but bear with me, right? If you've got a lackluster narrative, what you do is you grab the audience's attention. The new Chance on Sky at the moment, that's a very good example. Basically, you've got an incredibly dull storyline, but what you do is you open with a car crash or an explosion or something that grabs the audience, and what you do is you buy some kudos that keeps you going, and it makes you buy into the series, so that what you'll do is you'll hang around. It gives you some credit on that one, and you spend the credit gradually as you get more and more bored. So with this episode, they open with, apparently, a massive human spaceship is blowing up other spaceships in orbit. Bit exciting. And behind one of the old Apollo spaceships, which of course would be current at the time, is a flying saucer spinny disc thing, which doesn't look like one of the other flying saucers because it's a drone of some sort. So they build up the atmosphere of somebody wandering around space exploding things in order to try and grab your attention and go, yeah, this is going to be very exciting because there's going to be explosions and alien spaceships and the like. And really what they've done is they've just given you some credit to say, wait 10 minutes, I'm sure something will happen soon. And what happens is not a lot. I am not giving it as much credit as I'd like to, but you can't like everything. You really can't.
No, and I have to say that this is not one of the better episodes of UFO, shall we say.
No, that's fair enough.
And I think it's probably a good point here to talk about writers. I mean, one of the things we haven't really talked about on the UFOcast thus far are the behind-the-scenes personnel.
Yes.
The writers and the directors. And the name stood out because it's quite cool. This one and next week's episode were written by a chap called Rurik Powell.
Yes.
And I looked him up, and these are the only 2 credits he has on IMDb.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive, because to be involved in a fairly expensive show, and let's face it, this was expensive even for the time, you should have a track record. I mean, you can't get near Doctor Who for love nor money these days because it's a primetime show. You've got to do your dues and do episodes of Doctors and all sorts as a writer. So to have just 2 episodes, not just one, as your only credit, unless you're not a real person.
Well, so this is the thing. So I did a bit of Googling, and I found a conversation on a UFO forum from a couple of years ago asking this very question. Was Rurik Powell a pen name for somebody else? And the answer is no, it wasn't. He was a person. His name was Rurik Powell, and this guy had managed to track him down and have a phone conversation with him. And this was a couple of years ago. And then I also found the record on the Anderson website from Jamie Anderson of April this year when he died.
Right. So we can't have him on.
So Rurik Powell was a real person. He wrote 2 episodes of UFO, and there were rumours that he'd perhaps written other things, but IMDb only has these 2 on. And I was looking up other writers, because we haven't really talked about writers of previous episodes, and at least one of the episodes we've already done was also written by a new writer. Can't remember off the top. But it would seem that they did bring on fresh blood to write some of these episodes.
I've got Dave Lane, Alan Powell, and I can't see any of the others, but neither of those are names that jump out at me at all.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the directing side there with Dave Lane was a director.
Bear with me. Tony Barwick, where he appears a lot.
So he was the script editor of the show and had written for Captain Scarlet. So he wrote quite a few.
Just flipping back. Yes, it doesn't matter. I understand completely what you're saying. So it's good to have people who have a smaller track record turning up or no track record, but how you'd get in is beyond me, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's one of those ones where the pace of television back then really shows, I think.
Yeah.
In that
that's
there
a
is
very nice way of putting it, yeah.
Now, I watched 2 episodes this morning before recording this. So I watched this one and next week's episode, so I might be getting things confused. But I think it was this episode that there's just a random shot of Straker that lasts for maybe 3 or 4 seconds that's literally just there for padding. And I was just like, what is... And it's when you really notice the padding that you know that they're kind of trying to fill out the...
Were you having a Garth Marenghi moment and thinking that they're just sort of extra running down corridors, or it suddenly goes to slow motion for no reason?
I honestly don't know. But anyway, should we try and bring some positivity to the review?
Of course we can. I mean, the concept itself is pretty ahead of its time. The idea behind it all is who's going to pay for tidying up space. Now, this is 1969. People are talking about this now in a huge way.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that shot in WALL-E where the spaceship takes off and goes through all the debris, that's kind of what it's like up there. And these things are incredibly dangerous. They're travelling at massive speeds. It can put a hole in a spacesuit, kill instantly. It's a very dangerous thing. And because of microgravity, these things are just going to stay there forever. It's a very, very dangerous place to be. So tidying up by blowing things up, probably not the best method. But that wasn't to be thought of. I mean, you'd need some sort of vaporization, which we don't actually have, short of throwing things into the atmosphere, and that's going to help. So then you've got a whole hurtling things out into deep space, which just makes it worse. So the actual act of tidying up on a practical level, it's complicated. I mean, it's like all of those sci-fi films where they try and blow up a meteorite in space. Yes, all you end up with is smaller bits heading towards you because they're still traveling. Yeah. On the practical point of view. But the idea of blowing something up, it just kind of looks good. And you think, I've taken care of that, which shows a definite lack of grasp of what's going on. But you can live with that. That's not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea of it being, I mean, it's a proper science fiction concept. It's a hard sci-fi concept. But then you've got the aliens who are hiding inside an old hulk in order to sneak out, which is an 18th century pirating concept. Yep. So you've got that. So again, we're back to the aliens. I'm sorry about this in my notes. The aliens don't have any joined up thinking when it comes to invasion plans. It reminds me, in my notes it says, is this like a W1A episode? Basically, it's invasion by committee. And every week they go, let's try this. And they go, well, we haven't really thought that one through. They go, yes, but let's try it. It's like there's a really enthusiastic alien somewhere going, no, let's try this. We'll put lots of money into having spaceships that latch on the side of other spaceships and then destroy them and they can't come to Earth or something. And then next week they're going, no, let's try this instead. And they don't follow through. Now, I know that people have said that that's a major personality trait of my own, so I understand completely with that, so that's fine. But it's conquest by committee, and it's just not going to work. So
yes, this is scheme of the week, isn't it? It's not instead of monster of the week, because the monsters are always the same. Scheme of the week. To be fair, it is a pretty good one.
Yes, because all they're doing is making sure that, because they don't have to kill anyone, all they have to do is make it so dangerous you can't go into space.
Yes, so and then Moonbase is isolated, and it means that they can finally invade and everything. Well, no, in this case, what it is the kind of looming threat of this Straker deduces. There's never actually any confirmation, but at the end is they must have a super UFO which has extra weaponry that's going to be able to blow up the base underground. Did you notice the continuity error with the Limpet spacecraft?
What by specifically you mean?
Well,
I probably didn't.
It really bugged me because it happened twice because they obviously used the same stock footage of it. So in the wider shot where the lunar module goes past, the domey bit of the Limpet is on the bottom. And then you cut to a close-up of it properly behind Apollo 8, and it's the other way up.
Right.
And I was like, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
But
remember, there is no up in space, so fair enough.
Well, okay, but they've still crossed the line.
No, you're so right. I'm trying to defend something.
In filmmaking terms, yes. But the actual effect of it, the kind of the throbbing light as it kind of attached itself to the bottom of the thing. And I think you mentioned this last week. You seem to think it's done by blowing a hairdryer or a heat gun or something at the front of the model.
Well, I did.
Look like it's.
I don't know.
Oh no! I mean that seems very plausible. like the special effects in
where
this,
the spaceship's entering the atmosphere?
where it's entering the atmosphere, yeah.
That's a superb effect. If you did that on CGI, it wouldn't be half as good.
No.
It's brilliant. I mean, it looks like they're actually melting the model. And it's just, I love it. I absolutely love it. And there is tension, I'll grant you that. Obviously, you need to kill off some characters early to provide the tension later on where somebody tries to do the same thing, but because he's a better pilot, he'll survive. Despite the fact that he's ignoring the rules because he's a maverick, and that kind of thing.
Let's talk about Paul Foster, shall we?
Yes, why not?
So we had him introduced a couple of episodes ago in Exposed. We said then that he was a bit of a loose cannon, and that his kind of investigation was his shadow training, and like, here you are, here's your membership card. And then we've had 2 episodes with him in now, and he is definitely proving to be that loose cannon. And there doesn't seem to be, on evidence thus far, there doesn't seem to be that much respect for the chain of command when it comes to Foster's actions.
Definitely not.
You wonder why he isn't up for court-martial.
Indeed.
I mean,
but
spoilers, he will be, because there is an episode called Court-Martial coming up.
Yeah, but the thing that he's up for court-martial over is nothing...
Spoilers.
Okay.
Spoilers.
Yes. But that's fair enough. He is weird. He is an odd character, but he was introduced on purpose after they'd filmed a few episodes to give it more oomph, the series.
Yes. Now, him and Freeman, we're hopping around all over the place here, playing 3D chess.
I know.
What is it with science fiction shows in the late 60s and early 70s and 3-dimensional chess sets?
Yeah, can I just say, right, true 3-dimensional chess would have at least 8 layers. In fact, it would have 8 layers. It wouldn't have 3.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that to me.
Right, well, chess is played on an 8x8 grid. If you want it in 3 dimensions, admittedly there's always a 4th dimension which comes first because that's time, but that's the duration of the game. Let's not get all physics about this. Right? The 3 standard direction dimensions are up, down, left and right. Or up and down and left and right and forward and backward. Yeah?
Yeah.
Right. So, if it's an 8x8 grid, ordinary chess, it should be 8 squares up, because that way a knight could still move 3 squares and 1 square. Or 1 square and 3, if that makes sense. You're still moving 1 square, but all 3-dimensional games of chess seem to be 3 layers or have some bits that go off sideways. Yes, I'm looking at you, Star Trek. But that's kind of it. So if you wanted... But then you couldn't get your hands in to move the pieces.
And also trying to visualise a diagonal across those 3 dimensions must be really difficult. Like, to actually physically keep track of all your moves.
Bishops would be a nightmare, you're completely right.
And because basically during that scene, what they're doing is they're resetting the board.
Yes.
And it seems that most of the pieces start on the top level, and then there's a couple of pieces that are on the middle level and the bottom level. So it never seems that there's any particular consistency to like the rules of 3D chess. I know that you can buy Star Trek 3D chess, because I knew someone who had it, and they obviously had developed a proper rule set for how 3D chess worked. But
I seem to remember that had small platforms with like 9 squares on
that you could spin round.
Like
yes, yeah.
I also paid far too much attention during those episodes of Star Trek, which admittedly were lackluster.
Anyway,
so perhaps it's boring episodes of sci-fi that dig out the 3D chess to distract you.
Maybe that's it. Anyway, but I suppose it continues to develop their relationship in that they're kind of buds. Yes. Freeman is still sort of sidelined because Foster's taking the bigger part of the story, but they're still best buds within the organisation. And Straker is the kind of straight-laced boss. Yes. But then, when Foster comes back to Earth against Straker's wishes, he then has to kind of join forces with him to go and confront Henderson. So it's almost like, although Straker wants to play by the rules, he appreciates having Foster around because Foster will occasionally break the rules and do stuff that Straker needs doing but can't bring himself to order to happen.
Yes, that is more than fair. Does that kind of work?
Yeah. And they complement each other in that way.
No, they do. Right, so you've got that storyline on there. So you've got them marooned on the moon using Washington Square as a password that they thought they'd never have to use.
Yes.
And then Straker's got to deal with the general on Earth.
It seems really pointless because he explains it to Miss Eland in the outer office, which is supposed to be sort of where his cover as a film executive is maintained. And he's like, code word at Washington Square. And then he has to explain what it means, thus defeating the point of having a code word.
That's true.
For it. Anyway.
You're completely right. It would have been better if they'd passed on the code word and then they'd reacted on the moon to it.
Yes.
But that's fine. There's a lot of first draft tidying could have gone on.
Yes. But, I mean, it's interesting that Foster knows what it means. And that's presumably because he's newer to the organisation, he's had to read the code book more recently. And so...
That's so funny. Yes, it's very likely. That's very realistic.
Actually, that's a good explanation for why he knows what it means and why nobody else on the moon does. Because the others are going to go, right, we'll have to look that up. And he's like, no, I know what that means. That means shut down. So there we go.
Because he's just read the rulebook. That is very likely. I like that.
Yeah. Anyway, so you were saying you were trying to sum up what was going on.
I was rambling, probably. So Straker has to go and say, no, I think it's the aliens, and we need more money for my budget for my big spaceships. And Henderson's going, no, you can't have more money for your budget because it's your own private army that, weirdly, he created for him, which I don't get. So there's a lot of bickering. So what? Yeah. Basically, Straker has to trick Henderson into turning up at the HQ and then going, here comes the flying saucer to kill us all. And you're kind of, what? Oh, sorry. So there's a whole thing where the spaceship comes to Earth and everyone proves that it was, in fact, a trick by the aliens and all that nonsense as well. There are set pieces on paper where you think it's going to work, but I don't know. Sorry, go on.
It's just too much. I think it's too much of a leap. Because it just comes out of nowhere. That final act just comes out of nowhere, where Straker's suddenly like, and da-da, we've worked out that they were going to blow up our headquarters.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no other targets on Earth.
Yes, it's yeah. And the whole kind of let's switch everything off and have Skydiver fly over, and it's one of those things where it's like, In some other episodes, there's just too much information. You're like, you don't need to tell us everything. We can fill in all the gaps. And in this one, it feels like just slightly too much was withheld. But maybe I suppose that's the point, is that we're supposed to be in the position of Henderson, thinking Henderson's gonna win, and then actually no, he doesn't because Straker's gamble has paid off. I think you're right. A couple more drafts of the script may well have ironed out the issues with it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's called conflict, and the only real conflict, apart from the fact that the aliens want or are going to attempt to take out Shadow HQ, is between Henderson and what's his face, and they're just shouting, and I don't know. It doesn't feel enough.
I think what this episode does do, though, is to set up the fact that there is an antagonism between the two of them. At this point, we don't really know why that is. We just know that there is this antagonism there, which has developed from the first episode where we briefly see them in the car together and they're on the same side. And clearly something's happened, whether it's the car accident itself and Henderson resents the fact that Straker got to be head of Shadow and he has to kind of hold the purse strings and run this International Astrophysical Commission, I think.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Maybe it's just that resentment that like he feels he should be running Shadow, and not Straker. and this will play out because Henderson comes back in multiple future episodes of the show, in some really good episodes that I can think of coming up. So while it may not be a great start for the two of them here, I think it leads to something that builds as the series goes on.
No, that's fine.
And I think that's something that the show needs because, like we've been saying, kind of the aliens having what were we going to say?
Invasion plan of the week.
Invasion plan of the week. Yeah, there's only so many invasion plans of the week, and so the show has to have other strings to its bow for it to kind of go forward and tell more stories.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think this episode lays the ground for some of the future bits of the series that work better.
It's not an ideal jumping on point. This isn't something you'd show someone who'd not seen UFO and you'd go, hey, watch this, because they might not come back.
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough.
Yes.
So yeah,
I think
you
that's
know what?
true.
We've talked about it, and we've talked about some interesting bits. I might go back and watch it again. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen by any stretch of the imagination. And it's given us lots of things to talk about, which is always a good thing. So I've got no issues there. It's just, it's not something you'd go, hey, I'm just going to push this in now into the Blu-ray player or DVD or whatever, and I'll just watch that one just to pass the time. But
no, I think you'd watch it in context of the series, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. So, do you have anything more groundbreaking to say than that?
I mean, we predicted the other week that this would be our shortest episode, and
that is true.
We haven't been recording for that long, and we're struggling for things to say about it. I suppose a word on 70s architecture again. So we have the whatever building it is that they've found to be the International Astrophysics Commission.
Yes,
Is kind of introduced with a jolly Barry Gray fanfare in this episode.
Has it got cobblestones outside for no adequately explored reason as well? I seem to have a memory of that.
I think it did as Straker drives up over the cobbles. And then he get. And this is the thing. He gets out wearing his aviator shades and looking ridiculously cool before then going in to have his meeting with Henderson.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not. Yeah, it's got some. You can't just go. It's got some decent acting, but it has. You know,
Yes.
Everyone puts in a very, very good performance. Nobody's bad in it. It just doesn't make you go, yay, best episode ever. It makes you go, yay, that's a program I've watched.
Yes. Oh, and the other thing, we've talked about this before, is the lack of email.
Well, I'm not really
So-
surprised because it wasn't actually invented for a bit.
No, but so the thing that we haven't talked about, or we haven't been explicit about, is the part of the conflict between Straker and Henderson is the fact that that his commission is about to rule on what the future of clearing up of space junk will be, and it's teed up at the beginning. We've got these two guys in their spacecraft going around blowing up some bits of space junk and recording the position of other bits of space junk. And then Henderson's like, the budget's doubled in the last year. It's cost twice as much as it did last year to do stuff. We can't do a full clearance, which is what Straker wants. And obviously there's been some behind the scenes going on for a while, and Straker is putting together a report, a shadow report.
Yes.
To give his perspective on it. And Alec Freeman is on the move. The reason that Alec is up there with Foster at the beginning is because he's collecting the final data for this report.
Yes.
And he's like, you come back to Earth now. And the reason that Freeman doesn't die in the lunar module is because he decides to stay on Moonbase, conveniently. And so it's just two characters that we only know this episode who die in that thing. But it means that the report is delayed because they can't get it back to Earth on a spaceship. And I'm just thinking, well, they'd just have emailed it, wouldn't they?
Yes, they so would. Or send it in some sort of radio code or something. Yeah.
Or at the very worst, they've got these secure radio video channels to the moon. Have somebody read it.
That's true. I mean, let's face it, the Enigma machine at this point had been in existence for several decades. So you would have the modern equivalent. So you could send information. That's not a problem. We've got lights and computer screens and all sorts up there. So you're right. You're completely right. Oh, there was one thing I did notice this morning when I was rewatching it.
Okay.
And it probably means... I don't know if it's this episode or the next one, but there's one of the characters on one of the spaceships, and I think it's one of the people at the very beginning. Looks like a young Nigel Farage. Seriously. You're like... I was like, did he have a bit part? Was he an actor earlier on in his life? That's kind of freaky.
Well, having looked through the cast for our later segment on Doctor Who and Anderson Watch and all that kind of stuff,
yeah,
I can say that Nigel Farage wasn't listed.
Well, this is the guy you need to hire if you're going to make a biopic.
This is one of the things that you have to keep remembering about this show, is that this show is almost 50 years old. And in the same way that a lot of people who were in The Prisoner, a lot of people who were in early Doctor Who are no longer with us or are very, very old, Farage would have had to have been a boy, I think, when this was being shot.
You're not wrong.
I don't actually know how old he is. I don't care to look it up because I don't like the man. If you're not British and you don't know who he is, then don't bother. Your life will be much better if you don't know who Nigel Farage is. Yeah. Right.
We've brought it up. Let's do this.
What? Oh, actors. Right, yeah. We are going to... There's nothing more we want to say about the episode?
Nothing in my notebook.
Okay, right. So apologies, listeners, if this is one of your favourite episodes, but we have come to the end of things to say about it, and we are now moving into our Anderson Watch and Doctor Who Watch.
Which we're not going to apologise for.
We're not going to apologise for. So stick around for Anderson Watch and turn off for Doctor Who Watch if you're not interested in anything beyond Anderson stuff. So, and I thought we could introduce looking at directors and writers as well. And we'll I think in a future, if we in a future feedback episode, we cover all the episodes that we've done so far, just to talk about some of those. But the director of this episode was a chap called Ken Turner.
Yes.
Do you know what other stuff he directed for Gerry Anderson?
I absolutely do not. However, on the documentary that I was watching from Bravo from the 90s on YouTube, I think Ken Turner was interviewed, and he'd done a lot of earlier Anderson stuff, so he knew what to do, but he hadn't really dealt with people.
This is the interesting thing. Is that, yes, that most of the directors of UFO, and in fact I think everybody so far, all the episodes so far, are directed by people who had previously directed puppet shows for Anderson. So he's very loyal and had this kind of stable of people. So Ken Turner did... we've already seen Flight Path, which was the episode 3 episodes ago. He directed that. That was his first one. And he had previously directed episodes of Captain Scarlet, Joe 90, and Secret Service. So he'd been around with the organisation for a while. And would go on to direct a few more episodes of UFO for Anderson. So, yeah.
Right, I'm guessing that was him on the documentary.
I'm guessing that was, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. We've already talked about... sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I'd have to go back and look. There's the Filmed in Super Mario Nation documentary that came out a while ago on Blu-ray, which I've got. And there's lots of people on that who were interviewed, so it might be possible that he's on that as well. We should look him up and find out for future episodes.
Excellent.
And in terms of cast, did you spot anybody who has been in other Anderson stuff?
I only recognised and spotted, apart from the people we've talked about in the past, of course, I only recognised one person from this entire episode from something else. And he's a Doctor Who Watch thing. So,
okay.
So the answer is going to be no for me.
Right. So, and I find this interesting. So Drew Henley, who played Captain Maddox, so the pilot of the moon... what do they call it? The thing that goes to and from the moon. I forget what the orange thing that blows up. Whatever it's called. Anyway, the orange moon bus. Anyway. So he was in an episode of, or a two-part episode of Space 1999. Which, as I said, I haven't really seen any of Space 1999, but having looked this up, I have seen about 5 minutes of this particular episode, and it's called The Bringers of Wonder.
Okay. And that sounds more familiar than I think it should.
Well, so I think it's the episode where there's these. It's one of these ones where the true reality of the aliens is not what it seems. Have you seen?
They're like Gelf blobby monsters.
Yes.
Aren't they?
Have you seen Camille in Red Dwarf?
Exactly. That
Right.
genetically engineered
it's
Gelf.
basically
Yes.
it's basically like that, but rather than being green, they're sort of kind of brown and slightly minging.
Yes.
And anyway, so that's Drew Henley. He played a character in that called Joe Ehrlich.
Yes.
But here's the interesting thing. Do you know what Drew Henley is most famous for?
I do not.
Have a guess. It's sci-fi related.
Was he the person who doesn't blow up the Death Star in Star Wars?
Yes, he was.
Seriously?
Yes.
That was an absolute guess.
Drew Henley. Well done, Michael. Well done.
Oh no, I've wasted up today's luck. I could have put the lottery on.
I thought you were joking there. Yeah, that was genuinely a guess.
That was genuinely a massive guess. Perhaps it's because I saw on some subconscious level, I have seen the documentary about the extras who were in Star Wars who do conventions and things, and perhaps he's in that.
Well,
but,
so Drew Henley played Red Leader, so the leader of Luke Skywalker's squad, who
right.
I think goes in for the first run before him, and who, due to the magic of reusing footage, appears in Rogue One as well, which came out last year.
Right.
I think because obviously they were like, well, Red Leader would have been around prior to Star Wars, given that he's in it, so let's put him into Rogue One. And so obviously it's a proper connection with UFO, because in this he's playing the captain of a spaceship that blows up, and in Star Wars he plays the captain of a spaceship that blows up.
Well, I promise you on everything that was an utter coincidence and a massive guess. I will swear on my DVD collection. That's how hard I hold this. Seriously. But that's cool.
Brilliant.
So so that was Anderson Watch.
So you've already said that you spotted someone. So Michael, take us into Doctor Who Watch. Tell us who it was that you spotted.
Michael Kilgareth, who is known to some of us as the Fat Controller, who is the Cyber Controller in The Tomb of the Cybermen and Revenge of the Cybermen. No, not Revenge. The other one, the Colin Baker story.
Attack of the Cybermen.
Attack of the Cybermen. Am I wrong?
You are correct. He also played an Ogron in Frontier in Space.
What was he? The one who goes? Bleh.
He was the really tall one.
He was the really tall one. Of course,
I think. Yes. Who was he in this then?
Oh, you know what? I wrote these notes a few weeks ago. I can't remember at all. He was probably a very tall person.
Yes, he was, but he was sitting down for most of his performance.
I can't remember.
So I looked up the cast list before I watched this particular episode, and I was like, oh, Michael Kilgareth's in it. I wonder what he's going to be in. And it said he plays a character called Joe Steiner, and I was like waiting for this Joe Steiner to turn up. And this was that brief scene of, oh yes, there's a film studio going on here. So he's the guy that's talking to Straker about the film that he is making when Henderson comes in and says, I want to see you, Straker, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And he's basically saying, I love the hands-off approach you have in this film studio. You just let us get on with it. Which is obviously...
There's a question. You know Straker's assistant who sits in the office?
Miss Eland,
I've forgotten her. Yes. Does she actually run the place?
She must do.
She must do.
Because
she must be the most powerful producer in England who doesn't actually have a name on anything.
Yes. Because obviously the outer office and the inner office, that's the crossover between Ed Straker's two worlds. Because in that office, we've just seen the fact that he now has film production meetings.
Yes.
And so anybody who's involved with the studio clearly thinks, well, this is Straker's office. This is where we go and talk about film stuff. But clearly, Miss Eland works for Shadow. We know that as well from this episode. So she's sort of the gatekeeper to him, and presumably has to field everything whilst he's down below doing UFO-y stuff, which he seems to do most of the time. and we don't get to see him running the film studio a lot. So
No,
I
not at all.
suspect that that's what she spends a lot of her time doing.
So, you said that there was 2 of them. So, who is 2 Doctor Who people, or...?
Yes, there's another Doctor Who person.
Right.
And I didn't recognise him at all. So this is a chap called Alan Tucker.
Right.
Who played the navigator of the spaceship at the beginning that's going around blowing up all the space junk.
Got you.
And he is Lartep from Planet of the Daleks.
Fair enough.
Do you remember
him? I
him?
would have probably been guessing forever. I know the story. That's about it.
Do you remember who Lartep was?
Absolutely not.
He's the Thal that falls in love with Joe Grant and says,
"Oh, fair enough."
Says,
That makes complete sense.
Skaro
Come
with
back
me,
with
and,
us, yes.
and she says, "No, I'm going to go back to Earth and fall in love with a Welshman." Not quite,
Which is fair enough.
But that's the gist. So yes, that's our Anderson Watch and Doctor Who Watch for the week. Is there anything
Hooray.
left to be said?
About conflict? I don't think so. Oh yes, there's one last thing that we did need to say.
What's that?
There's now a date for UFO for the ShadowCon.
ShadowCon 2, yes.
ShadowCon 2 has a date.
Who's it going on a
which
date
I'm
with?
Currently looking. I don't know. I'm currently looking it up now because I have it here on my incredible.
I think off the top it's June the 30th, but I'm sure you can confirm that for me, Michael.
It certainly is. It's June the 30th, 2018. Just in case you're listening to this from the past, which will be a Saturday. And there's no guests listed as yet, but I'm pretty sure it'll be good.
And we are hoping to be there, Michael?
I definitely am hoping to be there.
I'm hoping to be there too.
As my summer holidays have not been booked yet, for next year, I'm pretty sure I'll make sure that that's not one of the days I'm away. So yes, that is my plan. I am planning to go, and if anyone else is going, I'd love people to come and say hello.
Okay. Good stuff.
So that will be pretty impressive, because that's going to be at the Derby Quad, and the tickets are available on the Derby Quad's website.
And you and I are long-term attendees of Hooverville.
Certainly
the Doctor
are.
Who convention, which ShadowCon is sort of a sister convention to that. And they run a really tight ship there. It's been really, really good. So I would imagine that ShadowCon will operate along very similar lines, and I'm really looking forward to going, if I can make it.
That'll be brilliant. Right, so I think that's enough from me. So I'll be seeing you.
And I'll be seeing you too. You have been listening to the UFOcast with me, Luke, from Tmudwup.
And me, Michael, from the Tin Dog Podcast.
Please get in touch with the show. Let us know what you think and any feedback you might have at ufocast@yahoo.com.
Or on Twitter at UFO_cast. Available on Stitcher and iTunes. ...2018 brings with it 3 brilliant conventions, all held at the Derby Quad. ShadowCon 2. The UFO convention will be on June the 30th, 2018. Hooverville, the best little Doctor Who convention in the world, is on Saturday the 1st of September, while Big Finish Day is on the 3rd of November 2018. All tickets are available from the Derby Quad website.